silencing political dissent in America. Is it functional? Is it positive? Is it even American? This is a continuation, by the way, of a topic Jim brought up last week that we worked on last week. And so we're going to open up today with kind of Jim's going to give us an overview of where we left off last week, and we've got documentation to share with you guys as we do. But in the meantime, say hello, Jimmy.
Hey, how's it going? And by the way, man, this internet speed is unreal because we're live.
We're cranking now.
Yeah, I mean,
we
went from a 4-cylinder to an 8.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm telling you right now.
So the studio is pimping now. Would you say pimping, Jim?
No, I'm not going to say that word.
You're not going to say pimping, but
no,
it's
kicking.
It's
kicking.
It's bussing.
It's kicking.
It's
I'll
bussing.
say kicking.
I think the kids say bussing.
Oh, okay.
But that's about food, I think. All right, so we got we got brand new internet feeding the studios, working great. Thank you, Frontier. And then we're going back to our topic from last week. We'll do another episode on that because I think it's super important. So go ahead, Jim.
Well, one of the things that when I called you and we talked about this, we had gotten like the heading on it. We had gotten like the first part of it. We did not really see the second part until they made it to the public so that you could see it. But what we talked about last night, while the condition, it's talking about summary of terrorism threat to the U.S. homeland. And we have the document up here.
Yeah, I've got it on the screen now.
And it says, while the conditions underlying the heightened threat landscape have not, now see, listen, you got to read this right, have not significantly changed over the last year, the convergence of the following facts has increased the volatility, unpredictability, and complexity of the threat environment. And they go, number one is the proliferation of false or misleading narratives which sow discord or undermine public trust in U.S. government institutions. Now, this is what I was going to say right before we went live. This was the thing. In the past, if you disagreed with somebody, they would call you a racist. You're just a racist. Remember how we went through that phase?
Oh, yeah.
You're just disagreeing with me because you're a racist or you're homophobic or all these different things like that.
They would attack the person, not the principle.
Exactly. So this statement right here, the proliferation of false or misleading narratives. What is false or misleading narratives? This goes back to what I'm talking about. What is racist? If we disagree with somebody about something, it's just because you're racist. So who's going to define false and misleading narratives? Who's going to define that? So they've already started to put this into play to where they're going to say, when you disagree, it set it up at the top, or other forms of dis, or malinformation introduced or amplified by foreign and domestic threats. They like to put foreign in there, because they want us to remember those guys. Threat actors, okay? So what is going to be that? Who's going to decide what is false or misleading? We have seen it over and over and over again where other people take the narrative that we might be talking about and call it false or misleading when you have experts come on board and say this is the truth.
And they shut them down too.
They shut them down.
So it's interesting that so who you're pointing out the first and most important thing, I think, is the definitions.
Sure.
So we have weakened our definitions to suit our political purpose, right? So everybody's a communist, everybody's a Nazi, everybody. Do you really know a communist? Do you really know a Nazi? It's not everybody. Not everybody's a racist, right? Not everybody's a communist. Not everybody's a homophobe. So there has to be clear definitions and delineations for what we're talking about. The problem is we're always talking about two different things. We're always talking about reasonable gun control and confiscating guns from law-abiding citizens. We're never talking about it's never the left hand and the right hand are in union with what they're trying to complete now. So we look at this. Who do we trust to decide what's good information, what's bad information? And is it wise in America or in any country, by the way, to remove civil discourse from the conversation? So they're not saying we need to have an organized discussion about these things. They're saying you're not allowed to say A, B, and C anymore. And if you do, we'll shut you down. Now, this is maybe in a practical sense applicable, except not in America.
Right.
So there are countries, totalitarian countries, that do this and have done it. China successfully for years and years and years.
Russia.
By their standards successfully. North Korea. but that is un-American. So we can't do in America what is un-American so that we can protect America.
But how many times have we always heard the left-leaning group say we need to see what other countries are doing and follow their examples? How many times have we heard that?
There is, because they have an idea that we are somehow so evil, so overwhelmingly powerful evil, and people don't hate us. They hate us ideologically more than they hate us.
But why do they want to come here?
Yeah, and who do they turn to when they have an earthquake or a natural disaster? So
or right now, with what is going on in the Ukraine, guess who they're screaming to? Is that time for your pills?
Time for the show.
It's time for your pills?
It's time for the show to start. It's 10 o'clock. We started early. You were in a hurry. The very first thing we're going to have to do is decide who we can trust to lay out what is or bad information or malinformation. Certainly, by the way, I'll go on record right now as saying it can't be all the left or all the right, and it can't be just the government deciding these things.
No.
We have checks and balances in place in the Supreme Court and things like that. So we have a system in place that could manage these things, but we have to allow for the system to manage it. We can't just shut it off because it doesn't suit what the left thinks or it doesn't suit what the right thinks. Because then we've defeated the American process before it's even started.
And we do it without violence.
Yeah.
We do it with conversation like what we're having right now. I mean, we have always been open about inviting people on that do not agree with us, but we want to have a conversation and not an argument. I mean, you can have a debate. You can have a good, solid, enthusiastic debate, but we're not going to get into screaming or name calling or things like that. Like I said, the old days were if you disagreed with somebody, it was because you were racist, homophobic. You go down the line, sexist. I mean, you just go down the line. That's how they would stop the debate. We've seen this happen over and over and over again. And we just kind of like stand back and go, okay, well, I'm not going to argue with you anymore. I'm just going to walk away.
Right.
Somewhere down the line, we got to draw the line and say, you know what? Our voice will be heard somehow.
So if we look at it in a national sense, in a nationalistic sense, and that worries people when you say that. But if we look at that, we need some degree of homogeny, of unity in the United States to function, right? Mm-hmm. That whether we disagree with or agree with what people say, they have a right to say it. So then, how do we stand a chance anymore? Are we so divided now? Or is there where could we find common ground if there was even common ground left to find? Does that make sense? So it shocks me that people on the left think it's okay to silence people on the right.
Oh, I mean, they think of us. There was a recent study that was just done to where they were looking at how people felt about each other. Mm-hmm. And the left, and we just saw this with the Super Bowl, Mm-hmm. You have people that were going to give you a mask and you have to wear it unless you're in the ivory towers and you can do whatever you want to. You can be maskless. You can take off your shirt if you wanted to, but I mean, don't do what I say, but not what I do. And it's
you're talking about all the celebrities not having masks on.
Sure. And they're wanting to push it on the people that are in the stands, the normal, the average person. Yeah. And so the study went and said, conservatives look at the left as being snobbish, elitist, all these things that you can add to it. Yeah. And the left look at us as stupid country bumpkins. We hold on to our God, guns, and the Bible. I mean, that's how they see us. So all of a sudden, look, this reminds me, and I hate to say this because you'll jump all over this, but this reminds me of the American Revolution. I mean, seriously, British looked at us like bumpkins on a log and thought we were stupid. And then they woke up one day and said, oh, my gosh, this country over here knows how to fight a war, how to do this and how to do this.
So what information is being poured into which group? So we would be categorized as the Fox News people. I don't really watch Fox, but I watch more Fox than CNN or MSNBC.
Right.
I watch more like cable guys nowadays.
Right.
But so they're pouring in information. We talked about this a little bit off the air, but the information is being poured into their minds by the headlines, right? That we talked about the importance every week. We talk about, it seems, the importance of reading the articles.
Right.
So
right.
They know nobody's going to read the whole article. Almost nobody's going to read anything but the headline. So when they see a headline that says white supremacy on the rise in the United States, they're done reading, and they think white supremacy is on the rise. So then, you read it and you're like, well, it seems to be in some of these things you sent me, they're conflating even white supremacy with Antifa, I think.
Yeah, well,
like they're mixing it all together, sort of.
It's any or
so it's
all.
I think they're calling it white supremacy, but it's really domestic terrorism from the left and the right.
Sure.
But they lump it together, but title it a certain thing because they know only morons like you and me are going to sit down and read the article.
Yeah.
You know?
The war comes home, the evolution of domestic terrorism in the United States. That's another article that we put out there. And, you know,
Is that this one?
Yeah. But when you look at it, it's just like what you said. They lump everybody together. Anybody that talks, it says white supremacists and other like-minded extremists conducted 2/3 of the terrorist plot and attacks in the United States in 2020. I went out and did a search on this and could not find what they're talking about.
And what is a terrorist attack? Is burning down a city during an Antifa or Black Lives Matter protest, is that a terrorist attack?
Well, it said
setting a federal building on fire?
and anti-fascists and other like-minded extremists.
So see what I would say white supremacists and Antifa are not the same group.
No.
Right?
No.
That they're both extremists.
They're extremists. You're right.
But they're not the same group.
Let us be perfectly clear. You and I both agree that there are extremist groups out here.
Yeah.
But when we start to get included into when the discussion is back to the original document, some domestic violence extremists have continued to advocate for violence in response to false or misleading narrative about unsubstantiated election fraud. So
I think
you
there is
and
election fraud, though.
So do I. So now, do we fit into that narrative about unsubstantiated election fraud? Do we fit into that?
So we would then fall into an extremist, because we're suspect of the election process,
right?
And by the way, Americans should stay suspect of their election process.
There is more stuff coming out right now as we talk about it.
So
there's more stuff to show that there was election fraud.
So that is, even if it was such a sloppy election. This was not the year to experiment with ballot harvesting and everything else. Maybe it's a good idea.
No, it was the year to do it. No, it was the year to do it because they didn't want Trump to win.
Yeah.
This
but
was the year to do it.
I'm saying in terms of national confidence. In other words, once you've lost faith in the electoral process, the republic has already fallen.
Yeah.
Right? So just because the walls and doors are still standing doesn't mean that the spirit of America is still there.
But the walls aren't standing.
Yeah.
The walls have been taken away.
So, but the infrastructure of America is still there. In fact, it's being reinforced with gates and fences. But the America has never been the White House or the Capitol building. America has always been the spirit behind the White House or the Capitol building, which is now broken.
Right.
So you cannot just sweep aside people's legitimate concerns, and I think there's some legitimate concerns about this election. You can't just sweep them aside and then minimalize and dismiss and marginalize people that should be questioning the process every day.
When we talk about crisis negotiation, and you're talking to the person that is causing the issue, let's go back to, because they list this in here, Colleyville, where the guy went into the mosque. Not the mosque, the temple, the synagogue. And it's down here. Supporters of foreign terrorist organizations have encouraged copycat attacks. That happens all the time. I don't know why they think that this is new. The copycats are always. That's one of the reasons why a lot of times it's not. No, it's on the first document that we showed.
Oh, this one here.
Yeah. If you go down to it says 3 calls for foreign.
I see it,
yeah. So they kind of like throw this in here like this is something new. Supporters of foreign terrorism organizations have encouraged copycat attacks.
All right, who attacked the was it white supremacists that attacked the Jewish temple?
No, it was but wait a minute, hang on a second.
Foreign terrorists?
It was a foreign terrorist. He was considered to me a foreign terrorist. He came from England. He got kicked out of his own neighborhood because he was too radical Islamic. Okay, but they go, well, we found that he read some stuff that he was pro this and pro that as far as like, you look at it and you go, well, these are white winged people that we wouldn't associate with. Where is that evidence? Look, when they post it, you need to go out and check it. Because just like I said, one of these articles said that there was all these attacks that happened in 2021, and I went out and could not find them. I mean, I searched for over 45 minutes looking for white supremacist terrorist attacks in 2021, and I couldn't find them. I couldn't find them.
Do we know? I mean,
somebody call me and tell me what webpage to look up.
Aren't there like white supremacists in Utah in the mountains and stuff like that?
Yeah, but there's.
I mean, I'm sure we have intelligence on this stuff, right?
Sure,
That's what I'm getting
sure. But we have to unpack every single one of them. We really need to dive into each of them, because mental illness, which they want to put it as, because he goes in and he shoots up Hispanics, he's now a white racist. But when you dive into it, you see that this guy is mentally, unhinged, and he's worried about his country being taken over by Hispanics. That's not logical. We can look at it and see, look, yes, do we have a porous border? Yes, is there a reason behind it? Sure, we know what the reason is, because they're hoping they're future voters for Democrats. That's what they're wanting. But here's the thing. Unless we give them the capability of voting, which we have not yet, they're trying to do it. They're trying to do it in New York, and it's already been shot down. And
if you don't need ID, you don't need to be American to vote. Let's be honest.
Yeah.
So then the question becomes: do they, because they live here legally or illegally, do they have right to representation in government?
Okay, a small number of threat actors are attempting to use the evacuation and resettlement of Afghan nationals following the U.S. military withdrawal from Afghanistan last year. All of us, every single, I don't know that many Americans. I truly don't. And, of course, I don't hang out in that circle. But please contact us if you do. That Afghanistan was a cluster.
Heartbreaking.
It was terrible. But yet we're going to throw this in here. A small number of threat actors are attempting to use the evacuation resettlement. So we can't talk about it. They're using examples in here to say you are a threat because you disagree with what the government said in this. And this is how we are responding. And how can you help? Keep yourself, safe online, maintain. But it goes on and it just says prepare. It's the old stuff.
So are we heading towards essentially a national divorce? And is this the language? Is this the language of divorce? In other words, are we if this was a civil union, a marriage that was dissolving, would they not sound an awful lot like this? Does that make sense?
Sure it does.
So they're attacking the character of the person rather than the principles of the person or persons. So that it becomes unthinkable that they would get consideration, right?
Let me point out a case that's going on right now in Canada. A woman donated money to the truckers. Just donated money.
The cafe lady.
Yeah, the cafe lady. They froze her assets because she donated.
$250.
They froze her assets. They froze her bank account. They froze her business.
She got threats and stuff.
Yeah, got threats because she donated money. Okay. I'm sorry. We do that now. We call it doxing.
Yeah.
If you disagree with somebody, they get your information and they show up at your house and protest. Mm-hmm. Now, I'm going to continue always to say this. Thank God we live in Florida because we don't put up with that. But they do those type of things. They've done it to senators.
And the intent behind doxing is not to embarrass somebody. To threaten somebody. So should you, regardless of your role in the world, should you have a reasonable expectation of peace in your home, right, with your family? So they go to Tucker Carlson's house.
Yeah.
Tucker Carlson is a provocateur, right? He'll start trouble.
Yeah.
But does he then have the reasonable expectation to be peaceful in his home?
Back up. What did you just say right there? You said he will cause trouble. He speaks what is on his mind, which is free speech. So why should that be considered trouble?
Well, because it will cause trouble. So we can't pretend it won't.
It will?
I mean, you've
then
got.
where's our protection? I'm saying
But
this is
what
this is what I'm trying
think
to say.
about. You've got to be.
Down.
I'm not saying you don't have to be brave to do it, but you have to be brave to do it. The reality is Tucker Carlson's Tucker Carlson because he's willing to do those things. Most people are not. Most people, by the way, aren't even willing to sit in the studio once a week and do what we do.
Yeah.
So, but then to pretend that is not somehow provocative, and we'd be kidding ourselves, because for half of every time Sean King says white Jesuses need to be torn down, that's provocateur. That's provocative.
I don't
Whether
disagree.
or not it's true or not true, I don't think Jesus was white. but who cares if the statues are?
Yeah.
But he has the right to say it, and B, he should then Sean King's house be surrounded by Christians with pitchforks and threatening him and if he has a wife and kids and things like that.
No.
Do they have a reasonable expectation of peace in their home, regardless of the role they play in public?
And don't get me wrong. I'm going to go back to Tucker for a second. He's doing exactly what we're doing. We just don't have. Look, we don't have the platform that he has to put it out. But he would be talking the same things that we're talking, because he goes in and looks into it, where people just read the headlines.
Yeah. And he is
Rittenhouse. Rittenhouse
is getting ready to sue LeBron, by the way.
I know. But
How
look
awesome
at
is
it.
that?
Look at it. 3 major publications in Brazil had to retrace their. I mean, they had to come out and put a retraction out, because they had said that he had killed 3 minority members.
Yeah.
He had killed 3
white
black
dudes.
And when they went and finally saw the case, they were like, "Oh my gosh, he may come after us." So let's say, "Hey, we're sorry. We apologize. We gave misinformation." But
so misinformation. So they've given misinformation, and now
they wrote the playbook on misinformation.
Should be held accountable for it. Now, by saying we were mistaken, I think they should be released of that. But or unless they can tell, that it was intentionally.
Well,
misleading.
if they didn't do it with malice,
yeah. So
they were just putting out the information as they.
So the Covington Catholic kid got $250 million from CNN, and you see Trump over there. We got a new gift in the studio. We got Trump over Jim's shoulder.
I'm gonna get doxxed. I can see it now.
Your buddy's up there. Look at him.
We got a smoothie now.
I know the light shines on it. I need a piece of plexiglass or something to put over it.
So, but I mean, it's just I want us to make sure if you're not prepared to go into war with this, you need to think about it, because if you start talking about some of the things, because like I said, they continue to talk about, they put in all of the talking points that conservatives are concerned about: COVID, the election fraud, the Afghanistan evacuation. They put out all these different things out here to say, listen, if you hear somebody talking about this, maybe they're a domestic terrorist, and maybe we need to look at them.
Is it not misinformation to say that there's no difference between men and women, or that there's more than 2 genders? How is that not misinformation? How is it not misinformation to say that America is essentially a racist nation, which it is, the freest, least racist nation in the history of racism and nations?
Yeah.
Right? It is as free as it's ever been. Not
fought
perfect,
a civil war,
but as free as it's ever been. So how is that not misinformation, but questioning the election misinformation? And, by the way, how can people on both sides of the aisle hear this conversation or see the things we're seeing here and not say to themselves, these guys are onto something, I don't agree with them, but they make a good point, right? So how can, right before the election, the Hunter Biden laptop thing, my buddies, and I'm friends with these dudes, on Facebook were like, they were glad that it was suppressed in America.
Yeah.
Now, no matter what you believe about Biden or Trump or anybody else or the election, you can't be okay with suppressing information in the media so your political candidate can win. That's horrible. That's horrible.
Well, I tell you what.
And that goes, by the way, both ways. I just think the right doesn't do it and the left does.
Yeah.
Or tries not to, does it more.
I made this statement Tuesday at a breakfast that I want the conservatives to take over the House and the Senate. I mean, I really do. I want them to take over Congress. But what I don't want them to do is spend all their time going after people that right now does not affect the country at all. Does that make sense? We need help with inflation. We need help with gas prices. We need help with all these different things. You know what's been happening around here? And I mean, I'm just hearing about this, but this is how corrupt this country has become. Because we have such a flood of people coming into this area, housing is hard to find. Housing is hard to find. People that have been paying $1,000 rent at places, the landlords are kicking them out because now they can get $2,000 for the same place. Yeah. Really? This is the country that we have become. It's all about greed. This whole thing, everything in here is about greed and power. That's just all there is to it. And so how do we turn it around to Christianity? We have to stand tall on this. If not, we're going to lose a Christian country. Well, let me say, a country based on Christianity, a country that was
founded on Judeo-Christian values, for
sure. If we don't, we're gosh.
Well, this document here, and I'll put it on the screen now, but this one does help in a sense because it defines the terms. I'm going to read it. The TNT defined terrorism as deliberate use or threat of violence by non-state actors in order to achieve political goals and create a broad psychological impact. So this, by the way, something we see every day in America. So that we see that they use pressure, like don't say this or you may be considered hateful, or you may be considered racist or communist or socialist or a Nazi, whatever. We hold over each other's heads that constant potential for the personal attack. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of what they're talking about. So in a subtle sense, it's kind of like that. Well, but the absence of violence or the threat of violence does not preclude reasons that events were not deemed to be terrorist included the absence of violence or threat of violence. So there's an overlap between terrorism and hate crimes. However, not all hate crimes defined by the FBI, crimes in which the perpetrator acted based on bias against the race, color, religion, or national origin, including violent elements.
Did you read? I'm just sitting here looking at this, and I don't know what the second word is, ethno-nationalism. But read what it says right here. Violence and the threat of violence are important components of terrorism. This analyze divides terrorism into several categories. Look at what the first one is.
I don't even see what you're reading.
Okay, the war come home. I guess I'm in a different one. Yeah. Oh, you've got the methodology. I'm sorry. If you go and look at the war come home, the war comes home, the evolution of domestic, because it defines terrorism also. It goes in and defines terrorism. Go down, because it talks about it.
It seems to
right
be,
here. Whoa,
seems to be off the same.
There. Yeah, you would think it is, but read what it says right there. The analyst divides terrorism into several categories. The first one, religious.
Yeah.
Not violent far right and violent far left. They're down at the bottom of it, but religious.
Well, religious terrorism in terms of Islam gets
but
the
that's
most
not
press.
what they're talking
globally.
Here.
Yeah, if they're talking domestically, we don't have a lot of religious extremism here.
Yeah.
Now, people hear me say that and get upset, but we really don't. Ethno-nationalists, so people that are people that think only white people should be Americans,
right.
or British people,
right.
people with Anglo-Saxon violent far right, violent far left, and others which include terrorism that does not fit neatly into any of the other categories. So,
sure.
But here's the thing: our government is constantly, and because it's a left-wing government right now, but our government is constantly pumping out warnings about right-wing violence. Yet 99% of the violence we see is left-wing, and they kind of
disagree with you.
They kind of glaze over it.
Yeah, they do. And see, here's where they glaze over it. They don't put the riots in there as terrorism.
As terrorism, yeah. So that was, the kind of the glorious
because
uprising.
If you really want to look at it, I'm sorry, folks, that's terrorism. When you go in and destroy somebody's business that they put all their money, time, and effort in, and because of a political issue,
because you disagree with them politically, or you take over whole cities or portions of cities, and declare yourself sovereign.
But we don't want to talk about that.
But those are the real issues that Americans then, that average Americans see and think, this is why there's such dissension. So you can't be a liar and wonder why people don't trust you. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
So if you lie to me for 20 years and then a pandemic breaks out and now I'm supposed to rely on you to tell me the truth about the pandemic, we've got an inherent problem because I already don't trust you, right? And it's not I don't trust you because I have trust issues so much as it's a government that and a media that's been misleading us for decades now. Right. So it becomes very difficult. So we're at the 30-minute mark now, and we've covered a lot of information here. But then we always want to turn it back to the church, the body of Christ. What do we, as we look at these things in the last 15 minutes here, how should we as Christians approach this? Should Christians stay out of this? Are we separate from this? Should we not be speaking out politically because you and I are Christians? Should we not be talking about these things? Should who gets to decide what role Christians play in the political process?
Well, here's something I would like to our listeners. This is something I would really like to do because I know I want to do this as we get closer to the elections. I want us to have. I'd love to have somebody running for the House or local governments. Local elections are so important.
Are going to become more important, I think.
We bypass them because they're not and we as Christians need to make sure that we're out there voting in local and state elections because they're so critical to what is going on in your area. It's just, if you don't understand this, just take a step back. And there's a couple of bills that, one I want to talk about. The Texas bill on 15 weeks, pregnancy, 15 weeks. Florida's about to pass one like it. It passed the House. It's in the Senate. So far, it's passed the committee in the Senate. So that means that it's got a good chance of passing altogether to where we're going to protect children up, after 15 weeks. They kind of call it the heartbeat bill, but, but it's going to be one of the strongest ones out here. So, see, that is why it's so important, is because we put the right people in place to make sure bills like this pass. And we have fallen, as Christians, we have fallen down so much on abortion. We just kind of like accept it. Yeah. And that shouldn't be the acceptance. We should, every time that we look at a candidate, we should see whether or not they're pro-life or pro-choice. And as a Christian, I truly I'm going to say this, and I'm going to catch flack for this because I know of a family member of mine who is pro-choice, and I respect that, but this would be where we would have our major disagreement. I would still love that person. I'm going to go to their house if they'll keep me, allow me to. I'm going to fellowship with them. I'm going to talk to them and all those things like that. But this is where we would have that disagreement. This would be the one thing that we probably wouldn't bring up at Thanksgiving. You know what I'm saying? But it's just that is just one of my staunch beliefs, and I should be allowed to have that belief.
Well, I think Christianity, and this is kind of before my time as a Christian, way before my time almost as a human, but as being alive. But we surrendered we surrendered to the world. It seems much. way before Roe v. Wade. Yeah. So we surrendered to adultery.
Right.
As a church, right, as a people. Way before we decided that it just was a matter of convenience that we could have more sex and less people get pregnant. Right. That's what it comes down to. Right. So we didn't. What bothers me is instead of raising the sexual revolution, which I was like 6, so I obviously wasn't part of it, but it was an effort to kind of equal the playing field between men and women in a sense, that women would not then bear the entire burden of a decision made by a man and a woman to have sex, which is fine, except that they, instead of raising the bar of behavior for the male, they simply lowered the bar of behavior morally for the woman, right? They made it equally immoral by having the option then of killing the baby if you got pregnant, so that instead of raising everyone up morally, it was just easier and more fun, let's be honest, more fun to just allow for everybody to have their cake and eat it too in that sense. So the church, we gave up. We surrendered the gospel first, and then with that goes everything that goes along with that. And I think we still see
well, but
that.
I mean, I would go back and say, when did we kick prayer out of school?
Yeah,
I mean,
50s and 60s.
yeah. So I mean,
right around the same time.
Probably during that same time frame that you're talking about, we said, "Hey, whoa. You know, we're offending people by praying in school." You know,
or having the 10 Commandments in a courthouse, even though our laws are based on the 10 Commandments.
Right. But have a moment of silence if you don't want to call it prayer in the school. Have a moment of silence that you reflect on what you're going to do for the day. If you're that atheist, I mean, how is it an insult to you? You know, just have a, but we took it out. You can have an atheist group at your school that meets after school, but they will go after you if you have a Christian club.
So Christians I think Christians, and maybe I use that word kind of loosely, but I think people have to, their faith, the gospel message is a matter of fact. It has to get to that point for you. It can't be God's a genie in a bottle, or he's simply here to make my life, to make me younger, tanner, richer, happier. We can't have a spiritual malady and turn to fleshly, earthly solutions to it. Better music in our churches, jungle gyms and Starbucks and smoke machines. And if we have a spiritual malady, we need a spiritual solution for that. So I think the church, we need to be realistic, right? We can't pretend we're things we're not. We're not perfect. We're not looking down on the world. We're part of this world where Christians need to remember that God moves through us. He comes to us and through us. He doesn't begin with us. We're not the Alpha and the Omega. Christians really need to stop living up to the stereotypes that are that the secular world defines. So should the secular world get to decide what role Christians play in politics? I would say absolutely not. Should they get to speak into it? Certainly.
Sure.
But should they get to decide that Christianity, that Thomas Jefferson or the Founding Fathers' intent was to protect government from religion, when clearly things were set up to protect people from the government? Clearly the answer, right?
And we've
handed it all back over again because we want to participate in the world too.
Yeah, we want to but if you can't carry, here's where you're using that word. If you're not a Christ follower, when you say Christian, we use that to win votes.
A little bit broad, yeah.
We use that to win votes. If you're not a Christ follower, then this is where, to me, don't mock God, you know? I mean, if you're going to use Christianity as something that you hang on to. But see, they're bold and brazen about it now. I mean, the far left, because the guy from Texas sat there and said, if you do not agree with gay marriage or will not perform a gay marriage, we want to come after your 501c3 status.
So when will that be? When I say marriage is between, if marriage, not a civil union, but a godly marriage is between one man and one woman, when is that not going to be misinformation, disinformation, hate speech? When does that not make the list? I say it's already made the list, by the way. For a political candidate to be so comfortable saying that in a Democratic debate should be shocking to people. That if you don't agree with us, that our political views should supersede your religious views.
You have to understand, going back to what we've been talking about today, because we really truly have to understand, as Christians, we're going to be persecuted. That's just all there is to it. Christ warned us about it, told us about it. We in this country have truly not persecuted Christians yet, but I see it coming. I pulled this up because I think this is something that we could talk about. We could do 45 minutes on. The 14th Amendment threatens 2022 candidates.
What exactly does that mean?
And so what it says in Section 3, also known as the Disqualification Clause, was added to the 14th Amendment in 1868. Now, that was after the Civil War, okay, that no members of Congress or state legislature shall have engaged in an insurrection or rebelling against the same, or given aid or comfort to the enemy thereof. So in other words, where an officer was fired because he gave money to the Rittenhouse Defense Fund, they could turn around and say it's because Rittenhouse was a white supremacist and he was engaged in a rebellion against the Constitution.
So there we see the dangers in allowing one side or the other,
because they're saying that
to define the terms. We need some way. We need to be speaking the same language, and we're not.
Because they're saying here, if you disagree with anything that is going on, like the falsification of the fraudulent election, if you say anything against COVID and the COVID standards, you could be really have engaged in an insurrection or rebellion against the same, or given aid or comfort. If you've given money, like we saw in Canada, it's a stretch, but they're doing it right now.
And would we? Yeah, and it, by the way, these craziness just happened in Canada, and our government said nothing, zero, about the rights of those Canadian.
They're
truckers.
doing it
and
right
we'll see
now.
how they feel about the rights of these American truckers when they get here in a couple weeks.
Right. Yeah.
When they get to D.C. So I'd say, we'll wrap it up, but I'd say for Christians, we need to be very careful to know what we know, first of all. Stop trusting, this sounds crazy, but don't trust the experts to do your thinking for you. So you can rightly divide the Word of God. You can study the gospel and not need Pastor Kevin to tell you what it means, right? You can look at politics and discern for yourselves what makes sense and what really doesn't make sense scripturally or biblically. So we don't have to allow for secular or even religious experts to determine for us what makes sense. Now, I would say the problem with what I just said is that it's an untethered statement, and our reason or our logic has to be tethered to Scripture and to that godly foundation. Right. So in that, I think in that is the perfect sense, is the perfect knowledge that we can find and build on from there. So we can sit with a better knowledge of God, studying Scripture, which is I'm always plugging that, with a better knowledge of the nature of God through the study of Scripture, to paraphrase John Wesley. We can then be able to sit down in front of these issues that can be complex and very emotional, and say, listen, I recognize the power of this. I recognize the pain in this issue for you, but we need to stay grounded in the reality of ABC. Right? That's where the solution is. The solution is that you're not going to put out an emotional fire with more emotion. No. It's only going to get worse, and we see it constantly, and it's spinning out of control now.
Well, and let's use a good example of that. When critical race theory came out here, it was not biblical. Yeah. If you go to the Scriptures and look at it, God sees us all as the same. There's no difference. But
it's fundamentally not scriptural. Yeah. You cannot embrace it.
When Christ says, even the sinners have rain, God rains on their crops and things like this, he doesn't even see sinner. Because of Christ, he's given us an opportunity to be equal across the board. He even said, I don't look at the personal appearance of a person. I look at what's inside their heart. Paul says, neither the Jews nor the Gentiles, slaves or masters, they're all seen as the same under God's eyes. So when we take an issue like that, this is what we're talking about, folks. When you take an issue like that, you go and read the Bible, study the Bible, and see if it's biblical. And if it's not, then you're not supposed to be using those teachings as saying that this is right. Yeah. The Bible is so against critical race theory, I don't even understand.
So a Christian leader particularly needs to, we cannot be untethered from Scripture. And that this is where, because we are in our Genesis 3 state, we're not qualified to be untethered from Scripture until we're back in that Genesis 2 glorified state. We're not able.
Right.
We're not able. Right. So so in that, Christians, and this is the closing message, in that everything, every direct revelation, every idea that the world puts to you has to be able to stand up to Scripture.
Exactly, because if it doesn't, then you shouldn't be teaching it.
Yeah, and you need to be living by it to have any kind of compass at all. Right. So magnetic north can shift based on what they say on CNN. You're in big trouble as a sojourner, right?
Yeah.
So that's our show for today. I guess that we're at the 45-minute mark. That was a very good, interesting conversation, Jimmy. Thank you once again for another great topic. If there's anything we can do for you guys, truechristiantalkinfo@gmail.com. If you want to be on the show, you want to comment, you want to be a guest, you want a topic that will do the topic, You simply need prayer. You got somebody struggling with addiction or pain and loss in their lives, and maybe we can help. Email us. We'll always do whatever we can do for you guys. We love you guys. Jimmy, tell them how much we love them.
Oh, well, if it wasn't for them, we wouldn't be here. Let's just be realistic. You know, we don't. You may think that we just do this because we like to hear ourselves talk.
I'm tired of listening to us.
Yeah. I have too many. I get to the point to where my mouth is sore and I can't even say words anymore. So,
well, I want to thank folks for watching online here. I'm saying goodbye to everybody, and we'll see you all next Thursday. And I don't know what the topic will be. We'll figure it out, and we'll still have our super fast internet worked.
Yeah, I'm
so
amazed
I think
at the power here.
I think hopefully
I'm
we
going
can be
home.
hope we can be consistent now.
Call Frontier and say, hey, give me the same thing.
Yeah. All right. God bless you guys. We love you. Bye.
Bless you.